Tyler. I'm more prone to be inquisitive, to promote discussion. Wait, inquisitive? I don't even know what that means. And who are we interviewing today? Who is this Peter Robert Casey? Why are you making faces at me? Oh, just bring the TV in.
It's Be Your Own Fan TV with your host, Tyler Taminia. Sponsored by M-Style Marketing.
So here's the thing, like we live in like a one-name world, you know, a society full of one names, right? We got Cher, we got Prince, we got Shaq, we got Madonna, we got Britney. I mean, Peter, Paul, and Mary even only use their first name too, right? I mean, so Peter Robert Casey, is there like a reason for like why that whole, you know, name is there and true, or?
There's a really good reason actually. When I was a child, I was always known as Pete or Petey,
yeah.
And my family always called me Petey, but I never liked that. It was too cutesy for me.
Yeah,
but anyway, so Pete Casey was a good name in school because it was never really messed up. Pete Casey and roll call, I was never made fun of. But when I wanted to start a blog and brand myself online,
yeah.
After the fact, a lot of people already owned the name. It was too common of a name. So Pete Casey was taking as usernames for social media handles. And Pete Casey and Peter Casey with .com were already taken. And PeterCasey.com, I learned anyway, is a famous Australian composer. And then there's another Peter Casey who actually directed the show Frasier. So I couldn't compete with these guys.
Yeah.
I went with Peter Robert.
So I mean, you know, look, I mean, especially coming from you, you're like the social media like king, right? So I mean, your like whole name is spent, you know, and the 140 characters that you get.
That's right.
You know, spent on your name. But I mean, I'm going to call you PRC from here on out because you know, we're not ESPN here, so we don't have teleprompters. So instead of making, you know, the poor Rick hold up your name and, you know, Peter, we can't even fit it on the board, actually, Peter Robert Casey. So I'm going to call you PRC for the rest of the interview. Awesome. So why don't you tell our fans a little bit about your backstory and how you became so successful on social media?
Still trying to get successful, but pretty much I started tweeting and blogging in October of 2008. And the story behind that really quickly was I was going to school at Columbia University and I was a full-time employee at the university in student affairs. And what I wanted to do, basketball is a lifelong passion of mine. I was a player first, coach second, and I wanted to somehow reintegrate the sport into my professional life. So I started blogging in October of 2008 after an internship at the famous Rucker Park uptown. And I realized that social media for me would be a great way to build and establish professional relationships.
Yeah.
And I went on there with that sole individual purpose.
Every industry is different. So what are the best ways for college basketball programs to leverage social media, engage fan participation?
It's huge. St. John's was so ahead of the curve as far as credentialing me as a tweeter reporter.
Yeah.
They're still struggling. I know the NCAA right now is trying to redefine their criteria to credential reporters that have internet presence only, right. And they can't wrap their head around it. But St. John's, this was during the time, this was August of 2009 when they offered me the credential. This is when the SEC was going through that, you know, their guidelines, whether or not they should allow video cameras in the arena.
Yeah.
Everybody, and the NBA and the NHL, or sorry, the NFL came out with the guidelines. So a lot of people were trying to constrain social media in some way. But St. John's was like, you know what, let's embrace this, let's get on the wave and see where we can take this.
You spoke about the NCAA, and it appears to be on the verge of expanding the men's basketball tournament from 65 to 96 teams. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you go to facebook.com/Save March Madness, I'm actually one of the folks behind that movement. It's supposed to be a social movement to prevent and raise awareness that fans really don't want expansion. They don't want to dilute what's already a near-perfect sports property. So I'm completely against it. I understand the coaches' standpoint for job security, but if you look at what happened to Dino Gaudio the other day, he got fired after making the second round of the NCAA tournament. 96 might not be a job security thing.
Right.
And I understand the NCAA wants to, you know, they're a nonprofit, but they redistribute a lot of their revenue to their schools.
Yes.
So I understand it from a business standpoint, but from a fan standpoint, completely against it.
PRC, what are your views on the individual ESPN destination websites, such as, you know, ESPN New York, Boston, Chicago? Does that help build community and foster fan engagement on a local level?
I think it's important. I think hyper-localizing your content is part of Web 3.0, is what we're going to see. And as a New Yorker, I'm obviously primarily interested in our New York sports team.
Yeah.
So I like one place where I can go and absorb all of my local content. I think it's a smart move on their part, and it obviously started with the largest cities first.
How do you value the aspect of online video streaming in the sports industry?
From a fan standpoint, to create video, I think, is cool if you're inside the arena. You can share your perspective for those who are at home watching the game on television, or even for those who don't have access to the game on their local regional outlet. So you could create content via video and share it on a place like Facebook or Twitter. So you don't necessarily have to just have your own website to create content.
Give your fans your one secret to leveraging social media.
One of the secrets for me was, I was obviously from a basketball community member standpoint, I was one of the earlier people on Twitter. And so the secret there was really just spending time learning how to use the tools. And I think one of the biggest things is listening always in any social media channel, is figuring out, before you dive in and start jumping into community, the secret for me was learning the norms of that community. What do people do? What's the proper etiquette? And for me, that was just by listening. So I created an account, I tweeted maybe once or twice, realized I had no idea what I'm doing, and I'm humble enough to say, okay, I don't really understand this. And before I discount it and throw it out as not a valuable tool, I sat there and sat back and figured out, okay, how do I use this? And basketball people weren't there, but so I went outside of basketball. So secret could be, go outside of your vertical, and this is what I do, is I focus a lot of my attention, not necessarily on NBA blogs or college basketball blogs, but I follow the people who do digital media, marketing, or community building online for a living. Those are the people I have in my RSS feed. Those are the people I follow on Twitter. They're in my Twitter list. I learn from them, and I apply that knowledge to the basketball community.
So PRC, tell us what's the first basketball game you went to, or where's the passion for basketball coming from?
I grew up in Marine Park, Brooklyn, which is the hometown of Chris Mullin, who was a St. John's legend. And as a child, the joke around the neighborhood was every mother in the neighborhood at one point or another had babysat Chris Mullin. So they told us this, and when Chris was in the Olympics in '84, it was one of my earliest memories of basketball, and you know, the whole neighborhood was behind him, trying to support him, and Team USA on their quest to get a gold medal. And I started playing basketball in around the 4th grade. My sister passed away randomly, and I used basketball as an outlet kind of to deal with these emotions that I didn't know how to really deal with. And it was one of those games where it's so simple that all you really need is a ball and a hoop. And sometimes a hoop can be homemade, doesn't have to be a professional hoop. So I used it as an outlet, and it was just passion just built from there as a player.
How can women's college basketball leverage social media to attract more fans and increase fan participation?
It's funny you bring that up, because yesterday I was at the WNBA draft. They invited a group of bloggers who mainly really cover men's basketball to see if they'll cross over for the day. Just take a look at the draft process. We got to meet the president of the WNBA, Donna Orender, and a bunch of the players, Tina Charles. But I think if you're in a sport like women's basketball that hasn't hit the critical mass to get the fan attention, I know from the business standpoint, revenues and have been where they want them to be, I think it's great. I think it'll drive attention and awareness if you can somehow show your fans what it means to them. How do you get them involved? Rather than talking about your own brand, how do you get the fans involved in the WNBA? And whether that for me was bringing me in and let me live tweet from the WNBA draft. You gave me access, which is a reward. You don't have to really pay for anything. You can give fans access. You can give them participation in some way while they're in the crowd. Reward them for being on Twitter and following them on Twitter. What can they get? Don't just duplicate your efforts that you do on your website. Give them some value, whether it's a reduced cost ticket or a one-on-one Ustream interview with one of their favorite WNBA players.
What are your thoughts on athletes tweeting?
I think it's great.
Yeah?
I remember...
Or is it like, you know, because you know, they feel like they're getting like so connected with it. They're almost getting in trouble. It's like this weird thing, like they're spending to Ozzie Guillen, for example, you know. It's going back to a manager standpoint. There's so much, you know, pluses and minuses with tweeting, and so it's kind of neat to get your thoughts on on athletes.
I think it's the best thing that a sports property can do is get the athletes involved. I remember back in childhood going to the bookstore, buying this 1995 book of getting Major League Baseball players' addresses and writing them a handwritten letter in the hopes that maybe they would write back to me.
Yeah.
And you fast forward now.
We all did that.
I'm not the only one?
No.
Okay.
We all wanted to get a letter from them.
I never got a letter back, though. So I was kind of mad anyways. But Twitter and Facebook and all these social channels and social media in general, if you have the athletes involved in Twitter, and that with like they are,
Yeah.
they actually now almost, they talk back to you. You write to them, they respond to you.
Yeah, it's
so you
great.
have direct access, and there's no filter.
Right.
And like no filter could be a bad thing.
Yeah.
We saw some errors in the NBA side, Michael Beasley, for example. What happens when there's no filter. But we saw some good things. Shaquille O'Neal, Amy Martin at Digital Royalty works with Shaquille O'Neal. She did random acts of Shaqness.
Yeah.
And it blew Shaquille O'Neal's Twitter presence into this massive thing, and a TV show was born out of it, something separately.
Yep.
So I think it's a great thing.
Good. Well, let's end it by something maybe I didn't touch upon and that you would like to add. I think you have a new company coming up here soon, so would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, that would be a nice way to plug it. But I started a company with 2 professors at Columbia University that I was working with. They're adjunct professors, and it's basketball centric. It's not social media focused, but what we're looking at, it's called Team Chemist, by the way, and what we're doing is it's an exploratory research company. And what we're trying to do is trying to help NBA general managers, front office decision makers, offer them complementary data about NBA players as people, who they are as a human psychology, their winning history. We're looking at a lot of different elements, and we're going to offer a product to them this summer.
Wow, that's great. Well,
Yeah,
good
it
luck
should be
with that.
exciting.
Well, great. Thanks for doing this. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Our fans spoke and we listened. We intersected college hoops with social media to bring you Peter Robert Casey, street name, the PRC. We had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. Check you next time.